It's 8 p.m. and it's Tuesday night. I got my laptop on and I feel alright. I got a few joints rolled and my munchies made. Got my headphones on and I close the door, don't disturb me. It's time to stand up tall and say some things about the shitty world we're living in with the boys at Raconteurs News. To Raconteurs, to Raconteurs, to Raconteurs News, Raconteurs News, Raconteurs News, Raconteurs News, Raconteurs News. Oh yeah.
You're muted, Jason.
Good evening and welcome to Raconteurs News. I was muted then, I do apologise for that. I'd muted my mic for some unknown reason. It's Wednesday, the 26th of September 2018, and it's unusual for us to be on a Wednesday, but as we didn't have a show for you yesterday, we thought that it was only like, and of course, it's going to be a very important show as well, so we decided we were going to have...
Sorry, we've got some serious issues with feedback. Can we please mute your mic if you're not talking? The button at the bottom of the screen there for mute. Sorry about that. Try again, Jace.
All right.
You're very, very faint here.
Really?
Yeah.
How's that?
That sounds better.
This getting here at 6:30 things really paid off for us tonight to get the sound issues sorted out. How's that?
We've got a terrible hissing coming down that it's gone now.
Okay. Was it me or is it... No? No? Yeah?
Sorry about it. Sorry.
Are you all right?
It's gone now.
Gone completely. All right. Should try again. I don't know what's going on. I don't know what's happening. Can you hear me at all? If you
we can hear you, but we've got a terrible feedback issue. Hang on, I'm going to put some headphones in. If anyone else has got headphones, they'd be really helpful.
Well, if you're listening to this and you can hear us, it's Raconteurs News, and we're on a Wednesday night because we did the show yesterday. We're doing one today. Can you hear me at all, Andy? Are you all right there? How are we doing with that?
No, this hissing's getting even worse now, mate.
Even worse. Okay.
I think the issue is possibly Philip's end. Can you mute your mic at all, please, Philip? Philip's dropped off the call, so I think we're good to go now.
Okay, are we? All right. Well, welcome to Raconteurs News. We had 3 guests for you, but at the moment we're down to 1. Hope you're doing all right. Hope you've had a great week. Yesterday, it was my wedding anniversary, so we're having the night off.
He's coming from your end, Jason.
You what?
He's coming from your end, mate.
Right, okay. Andy, you carry on now. Mute up. You carry on, and I'll sort my headphones out.
Okay, mate. Right. Sorry about that, folks. Good evening, and welcome to Raconteurs News, or as we might call ourselves, Speakeasy Radio for the 21st century. And really sorry that Jason's had to drop off there, but it seems he's got a few technical issues. But tonight we've got an absolutely fantastic show lined up for you. And we've got 3 members of the Jeremy Bamber Justice Campaign. Unfortunately, we've only got 2 of them on the call at the minute, so hopefully the 3rd member will be able to join us very quickly. For all the listeners, because he's been getting a lot of inquiries after his health, but I think we can squeeze that in later. So without further ado, I'll introduce tonight's guests. We've got Trudi Benjamin and Phillip Walker. Good evening, guys.
Hi, everyone.
Hi, Phillip.
And thanks for having us back, Andy. It's great to be here.
No worries. I'm just so upset that Jason's not here, because I know he was looking forward to this so much. I'm sure he'll be able to join us sooner rather than later. So I gather that there's been some huge events. Here's number 3 joined us. It's Yvonne. Good evening, Yvonne. Can you hear us, Yvonne? Okay. Can we hear you? Try speaking, Yvonne. Hello.
No, we can't hear her.
We can't hear you at all, Yvonne. Okay, we're struggling to hear Yvonne, so right, Philip's taking a picture. Right, Trudi, would you like to fill us in on what's been happening and what the new developments are, please?
Well, what's been happening is that we something that we thought for a while wasn't right, that there was 2 sound moderators in this case. We had been looking at documents for a while, and it was obvious that the chain of evidence wasn't correct, that examination records weren't right, labels were missing, etc., etc. And so the development in the case that has been Yvonne's speaking in. I can hear her slightly.
Oh, Yvonne, we can hear you just there, but it seems you're breaking up terribly badly. It sounds like you've got a really bad connection. It sounds like you've got a really bad connection there, Yvonne. Oh well, this is the joys of live radio. Sorry about this, folks. Yvonne, it might be an idea if you turn your camera off, because it seems your connection maybe can't handle the bandwidth. Could you possibly turn your video off, Yvonne? Hey, back, Jace. Can't hear you, Jace.
I may be back. I'm back.
Yeah, you're back.
Am I back as well?
Excellent. We've got Phillip back. Can we message Yvonne to turn her camera
Yes, I am. I'm messaging Andy to see if she can take her video off and then come back in.
Awesome. Brilliant. Thank you. Right. Sorry. You were just about to tell us what the new developments are. Sorry.
Yeah, so we've been looking at this from several different angles, but one of the things that, sometimes the simplest thing is the greatest. And, the silencer evidence was very strong in this case. It's probably one of the single most things that condemned Jeremy to a guilty verdict. And so it's something that we've had to look at quite extensively over the last 2 or 3 years. I think when we came on the show previously, we were saying that we were going to leave no stone unturned. We were going to look at absolutely every examination method. We were going to look at every single angle. We were going to try and get to the truth of what's gone wrong in this case. And in the whilst we were able to do that. In the course of doing that, it became obvious to one of our scientists that, in his opinion, there were 2 sound moderators, and we've been able to have a report written that actually completely clarifies that. So we have prepared that report, and we have given it to the CPS, and we're asking them to consider it in this case as material that undermines the conviction. And so this is where we're at. I mean, I can't go into absolute specific details on what we know, and obviously for legal reasons, but certainly we are, 100% sure that there were two moderators in this case, right from pre-trial, right through police inquiries, right through to the appeal process. And if that's the case, then it seriously does undermine this conviction in every way. I think we've lost everybody now. I'm not really sure.
I can hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, my mic was muted there.
Okay.
We've closed off our cameras because people
Right.
don't tune in to listen to see us. Really, they're tuning in to see you. So I think Jason's still there, but there's an awful lot of clattering and banging going on. Are you there, Jason? Jason?
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can still hear you, mate.
It just seems to be loads and loads of like feedback and everything. I've got headphones in, it's unbelievable.
Yeah, you're still getting it.
So, anyway, let's get right. Let's meat of the motion. I don't. So this new evidence. This congratulations as well on getting the coverage in the Guardian and the Times this week on Monday. I think it was when it went in print, and it's been on the website since Friday as well. Friday before that. So. How difficult has it been? I mean, how long has this been in the process where you've been? Because I know we've been talking behind the scenes for quite a few weeks and a couple of months. So, how long have you been going through?
Well, it's been an ongoing process, as I say. It's been looking at everything, going back to square one. As I think we've said previously, and the listeners might remember, that we received a transit van full of documents in about 2011, and it really has taken that long to look through everything. And the one piece of vital evidence in this case was the sound moderator, much more than anything else, I think, that we needed to undermine. We needed to have that solid before we went to the CCRC, or we put together any list of reports or anything. We needed to be ready. Before we made any admissions to the CCRC, we needed to have everything sorted. And the most important thing in this case is the sound moderator. And so it's been, a long journey. 2012 was the last application to the CCRC. Which was obviously turned down, and so it's been a long process of looking at everything. But it's always been, right from day one, that something wasn't quite right with this chain of evidence, from the labels to the examination records and everything in between. And it's just a case of pegging it, really. It's just a case of, finding the proof that we needed to show that there definitely was two, because it's something that we didn't know till recently. It's not something that we knew something was wrong, but we didn't quite know what was wrong. And it makes perfect sense. And in the course of looking at it all as a whole and giving it to the scientists to look at, they were of the opinion too there was something not quite right. And so, we can now categorically state that there was two sound moderators in this case, and it's exciting stuff. It really is, and it's something that is very much will very much undermine this conviction.
Right. Well, one or two people in the chat room have been asking what case, so I'm just going to go give a brief summary of what happened on the 7th of August 1995. For murder, Neville Bamber, June Bamber, Fell, and her boys Daniel and Nicholas. Now, initially, after, in the immediate aftermath, it was ruled to be, or it was thought to be, a murder-suicide, because there's been phone calls that Sheila Cappell had gone berserk apparently with a gun, and that she had psychiatric problems in the past. But 6 weeks later, miraculously, some new evidence was obtained by the family in an absolute miracle. Jeremy was arrested. Somebody came forward and I think Jeremy was arrested and convicted of all 5 murders on the 28th of October. We're coming into prison years now, up to the anniversary of this conviction. So if anybody his name's Jeremy Bamber, it's a very famous case from the 80s. If you're a little bit younger than we are, you're probably...
Okay, Jason, I'm just going to have to jump in there. We're going to have to sort this sound problem out because it's just terrible. Phillip, are you muted?
I'm not at the moment, but I will.
If you can mute, please. I think the problem might be coming from your end. Right, try again, Jason.
Right, are we there?
Yeah.
Still an echo.
No, it's definitely your end then, Jason. The problem's coming from.
Well, it can't be because I've got the headphones in.
Well, it's not. It's not just a feedback thing, mate. You've got a credible hissing going on there.
Okay. Well, I'll tell you. You carry on there. I'll mute my mic and sort it out. All right.
Okay. Have you maybe got the wrong mic selected, Jason, in Skype?
I may have. I don't know. I'll just check it out. All right.
All right. Sorry. Right. I'm a little bit lost because I've been trying to sort the sound out from my end. So if you could carry on from where you were, Yvonne, please. Trudi, sorry.
Yeah, sorry. Can everyone hear me?
Perfectly. We can hear you absolutely perfectly.
Yeah, Yvonne's saying she doesn't have headphones either, so that may be an issue. I'm not really sure, but I'll keep going anyway. Yeah, so I was just saying it's been a long onward journey to prove this, and it's exciting stuff, and it's really important that the press reports have been really important because we really want the public to be aware that this is a central issue to this case, and that it needs due consideration. And it's really, really interesting that we've come this far and we've got to this point now. If anyone knows about the rules of disclosure, it's very, very difficult post-conviction to get evidence disclosed, and for lots of reasons. And this is what we're still fighting for in terms of this piece of evidence. But with the evidence that we do have, this is what we've been able to determine.
Oh, excellent. Yvonne, can you hear me okay?
I can hear you, absolutely.
Oh, okay.
I don't know if you can hear me.
Yes, we can hear you, but we're getting a lot of banging and clattering from your end. Could you possibly mute your mic while others are talking, please, and then just unmute it when you need to talk yourself? Thank you. Sorry, Trudi.
I will do.
Yeah, so yeah, it's all good. It's exciting stuff, and we've asked the CPS to give it due consideration, and we're sure that they will.
Well, that's absolutely excellent. I did read the article in the Guardian before it came out. I don't buy newspapers at all, so I read it online. But I thought the content of that article was very encouraging from my side. I mean, what kind of what kind of boost to your hopes of getting Jeremy free has this really given? You know, on a sort of 1 to 10 scale, please.
Well, I like to keep my feet on the ground. I'm certainly not the person that you know is popping champagne corks prematurely. Let's just put it like that. But given that I am on that lower scale of keeping my feet on the ground, this is this is high up there for me in terms of excitement, and that you know, there will be something very wrong with the system here if this doesn't do what it's meant to do. You know, I'm a bit of an academic, if you like. I'm doing an undergraduate in law, and I live sometimes in a bit of a law school bubble, but I do understand the rules of disclosure, and I do understand the way the system works. And if this isn't evidence that makes this case material, you know, this isn't material evidence that makes this case very unsafe, then something is very wrong. So for me, I'm probably on about 7 or 8 out of 10 right now if I was pushed.
That's really good to hear. I mean, I know it's been a long, hard slog for all of you, and there must be times when you get disheartened, and when something such a breakthrough as this comes along, it must be a real boost to everyone's morale. Because I mean, you've got quite a few people working in the team. How many people actually work on the campaign?
I think there's 6 or 7 of us. I'll have to do a quick tot up on my fingers, but there's 6 or 7 core members who work really hard, you know, on a day-to-day basis. And then we've got a lot of periphery support, obviously, but people who don't necessarily want to be in the core group, but we're always grateful for their support and encouragement and the things that they do. So yeah, it is a very divisive, very lonely journey at times. Anybody in the miscarriage of justice world will tell you that it isn't often a happy place, and it isn't often a supportive place, other than in that little bubble that we live in. But we really support each other, and we're really there for each other day in, day out. And we have real lives too, but we've become definitely a campaign family that we keep each other going, and no matter how tired we get or how hard it gets for us, our motivation is a man that's lost 33 years of his life, who we consider to be a victim in this case. And that is our driving force, that is our motivation, and we won't stop until he's free. And this is why we do what we do.
Excellent. Well, I can only commend you all on your dedication and hard work in trying to get Jeremy free. I seem to think in the back of my mind, last time you appeared on, you were appealing for a printer. Now, I think we got you some help with that, didn't we? I think we've got to give a big shout out to one of our most ardent listeners, Super Leeds. Super Leeds pulled the rabbit out of the hat and got your printer sorted, didn't he? So thanks ever so much for that, Super Leeds.
Yeah, thanks so much. It was really, I can't tell you how many print cartridges we were going through in a week sometimes, and everybody knows how expensive they are. So to have, a laser printer has just been incredible for the office. So thank you. We can't thank you enough. I'm sure Yvonne will back that up as well, because she gets the most use out of it.
Oh, absolutely. It's been a godsend, because there's thousands of pages a week sometimes that we have to print, and an absolute godsend. So thank you very much, Super Leeds. He's
a top guy. He really comes up trumps when it counts. So yeah, well done, Super Leeds. I've just got a question at this early stage. I didn't think we'd have any questions till a bit later, but Johnny Jamshovel says in the chat room, Andy, read the Jeremy Bamber website. Is Trudi aware that the petition on the site is a pleading which can be ignored, a pleading from an inferior to a superior?
I'm not really sure what that means, but hey ho.
Yeah, I'm really not sure. I mean, I've got an idea what he's going for, but yeah, if you could let us have some more details on that, Johnny, then we'll certainly pass that information on and try and help out on that score. Philip, you're unmuted there. Were you trying to come in?
Am I muted? I thought I was.
No, you're not muted.
No.
Okay. Were you coming in there?
Yeah, I was just going to pick up one of the points that you made earlier about how long Jeremy's been suffering under this miscarriage of justice. To put it in context, I don't know whether anybody remembers the original Live Aid concert back in '85, because the tragedy, the shootings happened about a month after that. So if you think what you've done since then, and it's in most of our cases an awful lot of different things, during all that time, Jeremy's been sitting in a cell, the victim of this terrible miscarriage of justice.
Well, yeah, I mean, I suppose some people who were watching that event as young teenagers are now grandparents. So that's
exactly. So he has spent more time in jail than he has spent out of jail. So that just gives a bit of context to what he's suffering.
Yeah, and for an innocent man, that is, well, I just don't know how Jeremy copes with it, and I certainly think I'd struggle to cope in his circumstances, and it's just amazing that he's carrying on, staying strong.
Yeah, I agree, but I think the thing that keeps him going is obviously he knows that he's innocent. So that is the thing that really keeps him going.
Yeah. Well, I spoke to a few people. We had Michael on the first time you were on, didn't he? And he was saying how he kept his spirits up and talked about his time in jail, because he was in jail for at least a couple of decades, wasn't he?
12 years, Mike did.
Oh, sorry, I thought it was 2 decades. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it was 12 years and so many days, which I'm sure Mike will scold me for forgetting, but I know it was definitely over 12 years, so, which is a great proportion of his young adult life, which he missed. He also lost a child and a wife, divorced him in that time, so major life events happened to him while he was there, and it was a big tragedy for him.
Oh, I don't know who it is. I don't know who it is clicking the pen, but it comes across really loud through the microphone.
Sorry, that was me.
No worries. No, we usually get comments in the YouTube after the show. Who's clicking that damn pen? And we've got certain people who they're prone to do it every time they come on the show. So just
put it down.
If we can stop it before the end, then we don't have to explain on YouTube. But yeah, we'll get there. Okay, so I'm looking. Is Jason ready to join us yet? Are you back on yet, Jason? No, it looks like Jason.
I'm experimenting. How does that sound?
That sounds an awful lot better. That sounds absolutely peachy, to be honest.
Awesome. Then that's the way that we're going to go then.
Oh, why couldn't you have had it like that from the start?
Well, because it's not a normal setup, but my normal setup is the one that was causing the problem in the first place. So I probably need a new mixer. I think this mixer's probably had it.
Oh, right. Okay. Well,
they only have a certain shelf life, don't they?
That's it. Well, you're back with us now, and you're sounding brilliant. So get to it, man.
Excellent. Well, I'd like to introduce Philip, because I don't think Philip's been introduced so far today. How are you doing, Philip? And how did you? You told me before that you've been involved for about 18 months. How did you get involved in this campaign? And what was your catalyst?
Well, I remember the case, as I was just sort of alluding to, when it happened, because obviously that was a huge story at the time, and I followed the various twists and turns over the years. But a couple of years ago, my eye was caught by a story in the media about the note that was found after the tragedy that wasn't investigated at the time, but strongly that Sheila had been suicidal in that sort of period. And as a result of that, I started doing some more reading and reading all the material on the campaign website, reading some of the books that have come out in the last few years. And having digested all that, I came to the conclusion that Jeremy was totally innocent and that the prosecution case was just plain wrong. So as a result of that, I contacted the campaign and offered to help out.
Brilliant. So go on.
I was going to say much appreciated it was too.
Thank you.
Well, there must be a lot of hard work goes into it. I don't know if people heard the brief summary that I gave earlier on, or what you've been talking about in the meantime, because I had my headphones plugged in, but they weren't around me. I wasn't listening to them. But we're talking about the case of Jeremy Bamber, convicted of 5 murders in 1985. And he's been in prison ever since. And there are huge problems with this conviction. Now, it's really difficult, isn't it? Because it's easy to get into prison, but it's a lot more difficult to get out, because there's a whole lot of people that are going to have to admit that they were wrong.
Well, the problem is that once you've been convicted, the whole system flips 180 degrees. You're then guilty until you prove you're innocent. And in a situation like this, where a lot of the evidence is being withheld by the other side, that's an incredibly difficult thing to do.
Well, what we work in here is a system which, when you're presumed innocent, allows you a lot of evidence, allows you to, have what you need to conduct a proper defence. And then once you're found legally guilty, to try and overturn that is incredibly difficult, because then the disclosure rules change, and they're very, very stringent. The bar's set very high, and we do have a common law obligation still, but it is being used very, very rigidly against people who are, protesting innocence. To put it into perspective, there's been a lot of press recently about the Liam Allen case, the young man who was accused of rape, and then on the eve of his trial, the prosecution handed over to the defence evidence that did make the trial collapse. There were text messages that they hadn't previously seen, and the trial collapsed. Now, had he have been found guilty, had it have gone to trial and he had been found guilty, for him to get hold of those text messages afterwards would have been very, very difficult. And that's what you're up against.
So what's this disclosure rule? What's the difference between disclosure rules in the initial trial and disclosure rules upon appeal?
Well, in a trial, the prosecution gathers evidence against you, and or gathers evidence to prosecute you, and they then have an obligation to hand that over to the defence, together with any material that they don't use in their case, but actually might aid you. It's their duty to do that. We hope that happens in every case, but that's the jury's out on that, as it were. But once, and then the defence then have to hand over their case. So there's like a dual disclosure. Once you've gone to trial, then it stops. That obligation stops. That is in statute, in the Criminal Procedure Act, that has to happen. And then once you have been found guilty, the rules change. It then becomes a common law obligation, and you cannot be speculative on why you want things. You have to be very clear about what you want it for and what it's going to prove. They won't allow any evidence just purely for investigation. So if you didn't have that evidence in the first place, you can't go back and say, well, I just want everything now so that I can investigate my case further, so that I can get the result that I want. So the idea being is it's for finality of proceedings for victims and in the public interest, so that police officers put their resources to current cases and not historic cases. So as you can see, that's not a bad thing in some ways, but in other ways, if you are found guilty and you don't know what you don't know what's in that material that was never disclosed, and so sometimes the only way is to have all that material and investigate. And it's very difficult. It's very different in, say, some states in America where all evidence is public record. So if you're found guilty, they literally do say, well, there you go. There's all your evidence in this case. Now go away. And as we know, there are tons of innocence projects in America, that do this. They're looking through all this evidence and they're allowed to investigate their case further. Whereas here, that's really not the case. That's not allowed to happen. You have to be very specific about what you want.
The other issue, Trudi, I think I'm right in saying, is that in the pre-trial situation, it's the police who get to decide what might help the defence. Now, obviously, the vast majority of police officers would look at that in a fair and equitable way. But obviously, there is a temptation for a small minority of them to make anything that is inconvenient to their prosecution case not appear in the public domain. We think that's happened in this situation.
Yeah. Yes, exactly, and that's a possibility. So, and obviously, the rules were very different in 1985. Not really different, but certainly disclosure was not in statute in 1985. It only became statute in 1996, and that was as a result of lots of miscarriages of justice, including the Judith Ward case, which really was the standard bearer in terms of a miscarriage of justice case where non-disclosure was crucial to her conviction. And the rules were changed very radically in terms of what you were allowed to have during an appeal and post-appeal if your appeal failed. And it did, happen in that way for a while, that the defence were kind of handed the keys to the warehouse. But very quickly there was a backlash on that. And it seems that, that wasn't really in the public interest because, it's almost impossible, particularly when you look at a case such as Jeremy's, where you literally have millions and millions of pieces of paper. For anybody investigating or a defence team, it's almost impossible to deal with that kind of material. So one of the things that we've been very clear about, there was a 2014 case, the Nunn case, which is a very famous disclosure case now, which sets out the protocol that you need to follow for post-conviction disclosure. And one of the things they say very clearly is you cannot have a fishing expedition, you cannot investigate everything, but if you are very specific, you're saying what you want and why you want it and what it's going to prove, then prosecuting authorities, i.e. the police, the Crown Prosecution Service, should not resist. They should not resist that. If you're telling them that there is a piece of evidence there which will undermine your conviction. And in this case, this is basically what we're saying. This is what this report is saying, exactly what is happening, exactly what we need and why and what it's going to show. And, it should be very, very clear. We are, the Nunn protocol is adhered to, we think, very strictly. And in any event, they're still under a common law obligation to give us evidence and not resist looking at that material.
Joe, if I just interrupt here, in Jeremy's case as well, we have provided specific Holmes reference numbers from the police computer system for essential documents which prove Jeremy's innocent. We provided the specific detail of those documents as well as the police computer. Essex police refusing to disclose that even though this court orders in place that have been in place since 2001 and 2 that say that full disclosure has to be made, and that has not been complied with to this day.
So who do you go to? Who do you go to complain that they've not disclosed? Because I would imagine if someone's not disclosed, that's a crime, or it's at least a tort in some way. So who's supposed to enforce these court orders?
Well, that was one of the things that really sort of involved in the campaign. That, as Trudi said, a lot of this material is subject to court orders to disclose. And in effect, Essex police have just said, well, no, we're not. And again, in effect, putting themselves above the law. I thought, well, why aren't the courts following through on this and making sure that they do disclose? But for whatever reason, they don't do that. And they are, in my opinion, in contempt of court by not doing it.
It would need a court hearing, I would assume. But you know, we do have a huge list of what we know is missing, but some of it will be very ancillary and not really worth the legal team's time and effort to enforce it as a whole, I would think, at this point. But because we've really been focusing on other issues. But I assume that's what would need to happen, is some sort of high court hearing, I assume. But I'm not a lawyer, so, you know, it as Phillip said, it seems rather strange that we can actually pinpoint exactly what's missing, yet no one seems to really care that it is.
The point is, the courts don't seem to have any willingness to enforce their own judgments.
Well, that's right. I mean, there doesn't seem to be surely somebody needs to make a complaint that their court order has been breached, and that's as you say, it's contempt of court, and you know, if I'm sure if Wendy were on here, he'd be telling you all about contempt of court and his and how he's been involved, but how they reacted to him when he was perceived to be in contempt of court. You know, he got armed police that were around him. So it just seems to me that it's just like a case of the wagons all being put in circles, and they're just protecting themselves, the establishment. The more they feel part of the establishment, I suppose, the more that they're going to protect what has happened, what the establishment has done.
Well, that's right.
One prime example of non-disclosure regards the photographs, because we know that in 2002 that the photographs, and it's stated in documentation, that the photograph negatives were incomplete, uncut strips of pen. By the time we get to 2012, those negative strips have now been cut up and 272 images have been removed from them. Now, the excuse Essex police gave to the Stoke Church inquiry was that those missing photographs were from the beginning and the end of the strips and were blank images, and that they were irrelevant and there was no evidential value. How did they know that? They didn't go and investigate it. And why, between 2002 and 2012, had those strips then been cut up and photographs removed? They should have been left whole so that the defence had the opportunity to examine them in full. And that's just the kind of manipulation of evidence that Essex police are continually doing.
And what's the CP? We've got a question from the chat room from St Georgeson, and she wants to know what role do the CPS play regarding evidence? I mean, is it the police that have got hold of this evidence, or the CPS, or can't the CPS demand that the police, disclose this evidence?
Well, I'm not clear on what the procedure will be, to be fair, but it is, you know, as I said, if you go back to the non-ruling on protocol with disclosure, it is, you know, when we're asking for something in particular, it should be a prosecuting authority that does not resist this. And, you know, although the CCRC are there and have their own powers, if we're giving them something, if we're giving the CPS something which undermines this conviction, it is their duty to look. And so, that's the process that we've gone down right now, is that we've had this report. It's what we feel is something that is materially evident that will undermine this conviction. We're asking them to look at it, look at what we've given them, and we've also asked for specific items to be disclosed, and they should have these items in their archives. And it shouldn't be left. In the Nunn judgment, they said it shouldn't be left for the CCRC to be the gatekeeper. If we know what we want and we have it, and the CPS will have it in their archives, then why should a prosecuting authority resist that?
Yeah, it doesn't seem. It seemed. I remember when I was. I studied law a little bit back in the day when I was recovering from another thing that I was back in '97. But when I was studying law, that one of the first things that was drilled into us about the legal system was that it was better that 100 guilty men walked free than one innocent man be locked up. So it just seems that ideology is just it's just something that they say. It's not actual fact, because there's so many obstacles put in the way of anybody that's trying to appeal the conviction.
Yeah, so William Blackstone, I actually have the quote in front of me. Better 10 guilty persons escape than one innocent person suffer. And you're quite right. That's what we hold on to. It is the philosophy for us, and I think probably for many in the justice world, that's what we believe. But I think you probably find that a lot of the general public would disagree with you.
Well, yeah. Well, let's not talk about the general public, shall we? No, let's not spoil things by talking about.
Let's stay in our bubble.
But I'm interested in this article that's appeared in the Guardian on Monday, and also I think it was also in the Times. There was also one in the Times. I don't know if it was the same article or whether it was a different article. I'm just wondering how much of a boost, how far do you think that this is? That it's helped to move along. I know every single day you're all fighting and you won't stop until Jeremy's free. So every day we're one day closer to him being free. But how much do you think you've done a leap with this, and do you think that it's going to raise more awareness?
Well, I hope so. I mean, that's the whole point, really. It's not to try and, undermine the system in any way or usurp the system. It's meant to, raise awareness that it is ongoing. And things like this do give us massive boost and massive hope, because we know the truth. We've seen all the evidence as a whole. But the one thing that I know from my readings is that the appeal court almost isn't interested in innocence as such, and that you have to very much find a way forward to get a case back into the Court of Appeal. And when you look at this case as a whole, so much of it screams at you that this clearly isn't right, and something's not right, and this is an innocent man that's lost his life. But not all those points that you see or you consider will be, a Court of Appeal point. And so you have to keep going until you find that. And this is what we think we found, that we've found that point that very much. I know I keep saying it, but this is material evidence that undermines the safety of this conviction. But actually, that is all the Court of Appeal is interested in, that this conviction is unsafe.
We have a multitude of different ways we can prove now, without question, that two sound moderators were involved in the case. This is just one of them. And this report relates to just one of the ways that we know. But like I said, we have a multitude of different ways. And it's not just that evidence. We've got evidence across the whole of the case that absolutely categorically proves Jeremy's innocence. We've been working on that for a long time now. and the documents are all prepared for submissions to the CCRC. And if there's any failings with this approach to the CPS, then that's what we will do. But we're hoping that the CPS now realise that, they're fighting a losing game now, and we absolutely can prove that Jeremy is innocent and that the evidence presented at trials wasn't fair and honest, and the jury were manipulated into believing what Essex Police wanted them to believe and not the truth of the case.
So it's really that's the part in it. It's easy for people to believe that somebody's guilty of something, but it's far more difficult once they've been labelled with that to convince people that what they thought was wrong. I'll give you an example. Now, I walk my dog on my mobility scooter every day, and we go along to the park, and there's a little housing estate that we just cut through to go to the park. And on that housing estate, there's a white car, KA cars, little cars things, and it's white, and it's got written down the side of it, someone sprayed nonce on the side of it. Now, whatever that guy's innocent, it's somebody just trying to, just do somebody vindictively doing that. That guy's forever going to have that label attached to him. And so, it doesn't matter how many times people can prove their innocence, there are still people who will believe the first story and just sort of discard everything else. So, have you had much feedback since the articles on Monday?
Yeah, we've had a lot of positive response. I think, it's created quite a bit of a buzz. I think Jeremy's had quite a few people contacting him and saying, get used to tasting freedom, because this could be it. But as I say, we keep our feet firmly on the ground. But yeah, we've had some really good positive response on it, and hope that continues. I mean, it's important that the CPS are put in the spotlight here, because something will be very wrong with the system. As you were saying, it's once you're found guilty in the eyes of the law, and for most of the public, you are guilty. And it's the system that is so flawed in helping you overturn that. You can never retry the trial. You can never have everything again and just look at it from a different angle. That's not the way the system works. They use investigation into a miscarriage of justice as if it's a dirty word. It's very much used against you, but for some people, that's all they have is investigation. Because as I was saying earlier, you can't know what you don't know. So if you don't know what's in your files, how can you find the one thing that's going to exonerate you? It's almost impossible for most of the miscarriage of justice cases. In some ways, Jeremy's luckier than most, because he does have a trial transcript of some sorts. He does have a huge amount of his case papers. And for some people, that's not even the case. They don't have trial transcripts and, evidence. If they didn't have a first appeal very quickly, a lot of evidence is destroyed after 7 years. So luckily for Jeremy, because he really appealed from day one and was fighting from day one, he's been able to, collate a lot of his material. But the system is very, very stacked against you once you are found guilty. And I'm not sure that's what the public really understand, how difficult it is.
Sorry, Jason, just to complete that point, we know that Essex Police destroyed some of the DNA evidence back in, I think it was 95, because they've admitted that, saying that the officer concerned didn't realise that it was important, if you can believe that. But that's a sort of another point in that area. But Trudi, can I just say why the fact there were two moderators is important, or should I keep that? Yeah, okay.
I'll tell you what we'll do. I'll tell you what we'll do. Well, it's nearly at the hour, and we normally have a new music break, so you can have a comfort break, get yourself a drink or whatever, and we'll pick up on that point, Philip, right at the start of the second hour. Okay, why it's important? There were two moderators. There were two moderators. I know that it's just key to the new evidence that you're bringing forward. So you're listening to Raconteurs News. Are you there, Andy? Are you ready to play us a record, my friend?
Yeah, sure, mate. Do you want 3.5 minutes or 7 minutes?
Give us 7 minutes, mate, because I need to go and use my bottle.
Okay, thanks for that, Jace. Here we go. A couple of tunes from Heath. See you in a bit.
I am a 1 in 10, a number on a list. I am a 1 in 10, even though I don't exist. Nobody knows me, but I'm always there. Statistical reminder of a world that doesn't care. My arms unfold the dole, malnutrition dulls my hair. My eyes are black and lifeless with an unprivileged stare. I'm the beggar on the corner, will no one spare a dime? I'm a child that never learned to read, cause no one spared the time. I am a 1 in 10, a number on a list. I am a 1 in 10, even though I don't exist. Nobody knows me, but I'm always there. Statistical reminder of a world that doesn't care. I'm the murderer, the victim, I'm the license to a gun. I'm a sad, bruised old lady in an alley in a slum. I'm a middle-aged businessman with chronic heart disease. I'm another teenage suicide in a street that has no trees. I am a 1 in 10, a number on a list. I am a 1 in 10, even though I don't exist. Nobody knows me, but I'm always there. Statistical reminder of a world that doesn't care. I'm a starving third world mother, refugee without a home. I'm a housewife hooked on Valium, a pensioner alone. I'm a cancer-ridden specter, discovering the earth. I'm another hungry baby, I'm an accident at birth. I am a 1 in 10, a number on a list. I am a 1 in 10, even though I don't exist. Nobody knows me, but I'm always there. Statistical reminder of a world that doesn't care. I am a 1 in 10, a number on a list. I am a 1 in 10, even though I don't exist. Nobody knows me, but I'm always there. Statistical reminder of a world that doesn't care. I am a 1 in 10, a number on a list. I am a 1 in 10, even though I don't exist. Nobody knows me, but I'm always there. Statistical reminder of a world that doesn't care. Florence Nightingales, not enough Robin Hood. Too many halos, not enough heroes coming up with the goods. So you thought you'd like to change the world, decided to stage a trouble sale for the poor. So you thought you'd like to change the world, decided to stage a trouble sale for the poor. It's a waste of time if you know what they mean. Try shaking your box in front of the queen. Cause a person's fat and mercy it seems. It's a waste of time if you know what they mean. Hands and too many pockets, not enough hands on heart.
Hello?
Before the day starts, so thought you'd like to see them heal. Got to be at the stage and appeal for the poor, for the poor. So you thought you'd like to see them heal. Got to be at the stage and appeal for the poor, for the poor. It's a waste of time if you know what they mean. Try shaking your box in front of the queen. Cause a person's fight and mercy never seems. It's a waste of time if you know what they mean. A waste of time if you know what they mean. Try shaking your box in front of the queen. Cause a person's fat and bursting at the seams. It's a waste of time if you know.
And welcome back to Raconteurs News. This Wednesday evening, it's the 26th of September 2018, and you've got me and Andy Young, and we are joined by Yvonne Hartley, Trudi Benjamin and Phillip Walker from the Jeremy Bamber Justice Campaign. Just let me quickly just give you an idea of what's coming up next week. I've got on Monday next week, we've got a guy on called Dave Sumner. Now, you might not have heard of him, but you can certainly find him on Facebook. He's a bit of an activist. I had a beer with him yesterday. I sat and had a beer with him yesterday. He wanted to meet face to face because he has been accused of all sorts, being far right and all this sort of stuff, and he didn't really want anybody who were going to stitch him up. So I went for a beer with him yesterday, and what a great guy, honestly, what a very, very interesting guy, and I'm looking forward to it. He's going to be, so Dave Sumner, he's from Sheffield as well, so find his videos online. Andy, yeah, go on, mate, what were you saying?
Yeah, it's all right. I just wanted to apologise to all of those that are listening on Spreaker or on the website. We've had a bit of a mishap with the website, deleted the chat room, and I haven't got a Scooby-Doo how to get it back. So it appears the backups are not working. So I will get the website back, hopefully, for the next show. Sorry about that, folks. But if you want to join in the chat, if you can get to YouTube and click on the YouTube link, then you'll be able to chat with all the others in there.
Brilliant. Okay, well, as I said before, we've got Jeremy Bamber campaigners, Yvonne Hartley, Trudi Benjamin and Phillip Walker. And now what I want to just say...
Jason,
sorry.
just one other thing. I can't post you the questions on Skype because we're videoing Skype to go on the Hangout. So I'm sending you in Facebook the questions that I'm picking out the chat room.
It's okay. I've got them. We're going to get them in as well. But what I wanted to do, is just say, in this second hour, anybody who wants to chip in at any point, don't wait to be asked a question. If you want anything you want to chip in with, just shout out and we can hear you, because I think we were a bit Yvonne. We were a bit light on Yvonne in the first hour, so perhaps get her a little bit more involved. But just before the break, we were talking to you, Philip, and you were going to mention what was the importance. How come the fact that there were two mufflers? How was that important? So you're going to explain that for us.
Yeah, because I thought, for somebody listening to this who didn't know the case that well, they'd probably wonder why we were getting so excited about the fact there were two moderators. They might be saying, well, so what? Well, the reason it's important is that, and I should preface this by saying that, in fact, we know that a moderator wasn't involved in the shootings at all for other reasons, because of the nature of the wounds on the 5 deceased and for various other reasons. But because it's a key part of the prosecution case that convicted Jeremy, we have to deal with that issue. And the reason it's important is because the two things that the prosecution put forward as being key evidence against him was the blood that they said was found inside the moderator, which they claimed belonged to Sheila, and some paint that was found on the end of the moderator, which they say showed that there had been a struggle in the kitchen between the perpetrator and Neville Bamber, the father. Now, we know from having looked at all the records that, in fact, there were two moderators, and the blood was in one of them and the paint was on the end of the other one. Now, this obviously presented a problem to the prosecution, because if that was the case and they claimed that both had been involved in the shooting, the obvious question that would arise from that is, well, why would whoever did it change the moderator in the middle of the shooting? And there isn't a particularly good answer to that. So what they did was a sleight of hand. They gave the impression to the jury that both the blood and the paint had been on one single moderator. And that was the basis on which the conviction was obtained. And that is why they've gone to such lengths to try and hide the fact that there were two. So the reason behind their actions is fairly straightforward, and we believe, now that we can clearly demonstrate there were two, that shines a very harsh spotlight on what they did.
Yeah, but also, weren't the moderators, they were the type that would muffle a shot from an animal rather than a human. A human would still hear the shot, whereas those moderators were designed so that animals wouldn't hear a shot.
That's true. I mean, I'm not a ballistics expert, but I understand they changed the pitch of the sound, which means that animals are less likely to hear it and run when they hear the retort of the rifle as the bullets coming towards them.
But as well, now we also know that no sound moderator of any description was involved in the incident whatsoever. Yeah. We can now show that the scratch marks that were supposed to have resulted from the incident weren't there 7th of August. It was weeks before they appeared, and we can prove when that happened now, which we weren't able to do in 2012. And we can now do that categorically. So we can state as an absolute fact that there was sound moderating even involved in the incident.
And yet they had hold of two, and they're using these as evidence.
Well, they had two, but they gave the impression there was only one, and the two key pieces of evidence that they put forward were both on one moderator, when in fact they were on two.
Okay, so how Well, this moderator, it was found by family members, wasn't it? A few weeks after the murders. I presume that they were. What's the story behind what it was? How it was found?
One of them was found. One of them was
One
found.
of them was.
Sorry,
One of them was found on the 10th of August when the relatives were in the house. It was found by David in the gun cupboard. But we now know Essex police also discovered one on the 7th of August that was reported during a press conference that they gave in September, and that evidence was using direct quotes from one of the senior police officers at the time, appeared in the press in September 1985. It said that on the day of the tragedy, shortly after the police team entered the house, that a sound moderator the gun cupboard. Essex police have never admitted to that. The recordings from that press conference in 2002, mysteriously, there's only sections of that press conference available, but yet it was widely reported in the press, in the Mirror, in the Sun, and in local Essex police newspapers. That was said at the press conference.
Yeah, I've actually got, I don't know if people can see this, I've actually got a printout of the Mirror article here, and it was from the 17th of September. And it says that yesterday a startling revelation was made to the Mirror. Police discovered a blood-stained gun silencer at the farm on the day of the massacres. So clearly not 3 days after, that then took, several days to be handed in and tested. But actually, it clearly says in the press on the day of the massacres. And as Yvonne says, it is repeated in other formats. So it all goes back to what we're saying.
I was interested when you said before, since the articles come out, Jeremy's had a lot of contact, people supporting him and sending him wishes and stuff like that. Because, if I don't know if you remember, but I tried to write to Jeremy, and I got my letter sent back with a very just a letter that just said we don't think you should be having contact with him. So that's interesting. There are people able to get through to him then, because I thought it was just like a complete blanket ban.
No, I mean, in theory, Jeremy should have access to the media, certainly by written correspondence. They don't always allow phone calls or visits, but they certainly should allow written contact. There was a case that Michael O'Brien was involved in, the Sims ruling, that anyone protesting innocence should have access to the media. So, I mean, I guess if you class yourself media, Jason, I'm not really sure, but it does happen. Letters do get stopped. It does happen, and I guess the prison have their reasons, but yeah. I can't really comment.
I did say that I did a radio show, but I never said that I was media. I never professed to be media, and I wouldn't. I'm just a guy who a couple of nights a week talks to people like yourselves and tries to get to the bottom of things. I just want to read out a few of the comments that we've had in the chat room. Here's one question. Can you ask, how did they get the transit van full of evidence in 2011? We'll put that to one side just for a second. The FUBAR 1066 says, was it the need to find the guilty party as quick as possible, pushed by the anger of the general public? So do you think that they wanted to find somebody to blame? I think they'd already got somebody to blame in the first instance, because it was all put down to Sheila Caffell, wasn't it? So I think that probably answers that question. But again, another one. And a Fran in London, this is just a comment, not a question. I'm so relieved someone is actually doing something to help him after half his life was stolen from him. Chin up, Jeremy, your time is coming. And I think we'd all sense that's sentiments that we'd all echo.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks for that. That's that's all our thoughts exactly. But we're happy that we've been able to do something that's a little bit more tangible, that hopefully will yield results. But we're not there yet.
One thing I would like to in assisting in answering one of those questions about whether they needed somebody to charge with the murders. From the outset, Essex police knew it was a murder-suicide. That was their conclusion. But the pressure from Jeremy's uncle, Robert Bowflower, was continuous. The cookie in the nest was not getting the inheritance, and he bombarded Essex police, and he was in contact with them every day, with his theories, with his speculation, with his fairy stories, to be quite honest, about Jeremy's involvement. He went to the lengths of disinheriting Jeremy, because even before Jeremy was a suspect, he went to see solicitors on the 24th of August to inquire how to change Mabel Speakman's will. Now, Mabel Speakman was Jeremy's grandmother, June's mother, and Pamela Bowflower's mother, who Robert was married. And by the 3rd of September, so Jeremy's still not even a suspect, they'd got Mabel to change her will, which left everything to Pamela Bowflower. Now, Mabel inherited the estates of June and Neville prior to the trial, and the jury was never told. Yet at the trial, the jury asked a specific question: that if Jeremy was jailed and convicted of murder and went to prison for a long time, who would inherit his estate? Would it be his uncle and his family, and would that give them multiply? And they came back and was told, no, that's not the case. But incidentally, as a matter of importance, is that the blood group that was found and attributed to Sheila at the trial is also an exact, perfect match to the blood group of Robert Bowflower when his blood group was taken in September 1986, was prior to the trial. But yet again, the jury were not told. It was asked if he could ever cut himself while handling a rifle and a self-moderator, and he said no. But the jury were not told the importance of that. And during summing up by the judge, the jury came back and said, can you please explain this blood evidence to us again? He did explain it to them again, but emphasised the fact that which was wrong. Jury were misled, absolutely. So this man who hated Jeremy with a vengeance, because the cookie wasn't inherited anything, as far as he's concerned, he had no entitlement to the family treasures, and he bombarded the police, came forward with his fairy stories, and as far as I'm concerned, that man contributed greatly to the conviction of Jeremy.
Yeah, if you follow the money, it does suggest that, doesn't it? I mean, there is a clear motive. We've not only got motive. We've also got these people were well connected, weren't they? These people were really well connected in the local community. They were well connected with. I think they were Freemasons in some cases, but you know they still had. They had the connections that would be able to manipulate something like this, you know. Because for me, if they came a few weeks later and said, "Oh, we found this, and this is obviously evidence that Jeremy's done it," because that's where it was going, then there has to be somebody complicit on the other end of that deal. If you know what I mean.
Absolutely, and we know that. Robert Bowflower wrote a letter of complaint to the Chief Constable of Essex Police, and lo and behold, the day after, DCI Ainsley was then allocated the case, and it turned on its head. All of a sudden, DCI Ainsley was completely on Robert Bowflower's side and did his best to comply with what he wanted, and his investigations and stupid allegations regarding wetsuits and bicycles and just absolutely ridiculous.
And the other point we should make on that, just to complete the circle, is that Ainsley subsequently went to work for Robert Bowflower.
Sorry, I didn't quite catch that one, Phillip.
I was just saying, to complete that sort of theme, Ainsley, the detective who was put in charge of the second investigation, subsequently went to work for Robert Boutflower at the caravan site on a very generous salary.
Wow, that's interesting, isn't it? It really is interesting. Just had so we've got a comment here from Samantha. It says the press has trashed Bamber in inverted commas even before the trial. Same dirty tricks done to Ian Huntley, but we see this done to numerous people, don't we? Where there's a trial by media, and it seems to be accepted because people see that it's such a heinous crime that anybody that the police is telling you that has done it or are implying that has done it, because you know, in this case, it just never even should have gone to trial, should it? I mean, it should have been able to be proven to be nuts. You know, Jeremy was even outside. Was he outside when they heard gunshots inside? Was he outside with the police? I know he was outside with the police, wasn't he? And he said that
he didn't hear gunshots. There was a movement seen at the window about 2 police officers. We then told Jeremy. They wrote handwritten statements that night and made a situation report about that. Trial, one of the officers was asked and said it was a trick of the life, and that was it. It was left at that. The defence didn't pursue the issue, and they never even asked the other police officer what he'd seen. There was lights in the house going on, and there was Sheila was, when the police broke in, one of the police officers was shouting to Sheila to make herself known because she'd been running about upstairs. A female was seen as well as a male in the kitchen through the kitchen window, but where team entered, there was just no. The gun was seen in a window prior to the raid team entering. The 2 officers witnessed, but the mysterious wasn't there when the police entered the house. We know a 999 call was made from in the house. And all the time, Jeremy down on the lane, surrounded by 77 police officers who was at the scene.
Yeah. Listen, that we've had a few messages. That last one was from Sane Man, apparently. Sane Man. So he's obviously very sane because he's listening to Raconteurs News like everybody else is that's listening to us. It's nearly 8:30 on this Wednesday night. It's an extra one. I'm sorry. We're having a few difficulties. I don't know if everybody else is, but I'm having a bit of difficulty hearing you, Yvonne. So, you know, I think we'll probably just try to get Trudi in a little bit more and Phillip as well, because it's although it's great information, it's really difficult to decipher, and I really want. So if Trudi, if you could sort of elaborate on what Yvonne was just telling us there, but she told us in a bit of a Norman Collier voice. That's one for the teenagers.
Yeah, that was my interpretation. Yeah, I mean, what she's saying is there wasn't per se gunshots coming from the house, but there was lots of movement, lights on and off, curtains, you know, open and closed, and movement. And this has been well documented. I think when we came on the show props last time, we just launched the Sheila Alive campaign. And this gives all the different ways in which we can show that Sheila was actually alive and moving around in the house where Jeremy was outside with the police. I mean, obviously it took them several hours to go in, and by the time they did go in, everybody inside was sadly dead. But yeah, I mean, what we know for sure about this sound moderator, as Phillip was saying earlier, is one, it was never used anyway. At trial, they said it was Sheila's blood type, but we now know that Robert's blood type matched the same. but the jury were never told that. At the 2002 appeal, we were told that Sheila's DNA was not in the sound moderator, but obviously we don't know which sound moderator they now tested. But irrelevant to that, there was an unknown male DNA. So if it was the one with the blood on that matched Sheila's, could it have been Robert's DNA? We don't have Robert's DNA, so we don't know. So the whole thing, the whole chain of evidence, the whole thing is just a mess and completely irrelevant to this case, and should make this conviction completely collapse. They should never have been introduced in the first place. As we know, there was one found at the scene on the day. We know the relatives say they found one 3 days later that was then tested. And it's just all been one big red herring in this case that is absolutely meaningless from the start to finish, especially now with the chain of evidence being so compromised. We still don't have the original exhibit label from one of the, from the original silencer, and it's just a mess start to finish. So it's not good at all.
No, that's my impression of it. It is that it's sort of like they're going to stitch. We know they stitch people up. We know they do that. I mean, we've got so many miscarriages of justice that have been revealed, particularly from around about that time. The 80s, the 70s. That time it was endemic. That there was police corruption. Police were stitching people up. You've got to look at the Birmingham 6, the Guildford 4, Barry George. I mean, that's even later. That's sort of 90s. So it's not. And all these are examples of where the police have stitched them up. We're not talking about where there's been an honest, genuine mistake. It's all these cases that I'm talking about. The police have stitched these people up. Or the police, along with help of other people, have stitched up this. And so, when people will say to you, he's been convicted and he's guilty. He's obviously guilty because he's been convicted, and people were. He was tried by a jury. There's 12 of his peers and everything. But if they're not given all the evidence, and they're not given there was evidence that was withheld that's still being withheld to this day. I mean, we're talking about 30 odd years later, 33 years later that we're talking, and this evidence is still being withheld. So, it's a huge beast that you're fighting. I mean, what's your next move?
Well, we wait. We wait and see what happens now. We hope. I mean, I think as I was, I explained a little bit earlier about the protocol in terms of getting disclosure once you're a convicted person. That protocol obviously assumes that everything went right in the first place. So if you're looking for, you're giving the prosecuting authorities something specific for them to give you. And they're resisting that because they're saying, oh, well, that's not a new piece of evidence, or that doesn't undermine the conviction. That's making a big assumption that the disclosure regime was correct in the first place. And we clearly believe that it wasn't correct in this case, that things were manipulated. The chain of evidence on the examination records was not correct. And, forensic scientists do have a duty. They have a duty to the court, and a prosecuting authority also has a duty to the court. They have to make sure that chains of evidence are correct, things are signed in the right way, things are handed over in the right way. And although there's beautifully written manuals and all the rest of it, it's telling us what that protocol should be. We're going back to 1985 now, and they also had protocols. They were in place at that time. It wasn't random. There were procedures, and things should have been signed correctly, passed from department to department correctly, and signed off. And we know from the evidence that we have that did not happen. And, so we hope, we keep going, and we which is quite simple, really, on the face of it, in an understanding why categorically there has to be 2. But we've got 100 other ways that we can show that. I think, there's, Jeremy's been working on it for a while, and he's got, a lot of different ways that he can show there were 2 moderators in this case. So, if the CPS want more, then there is more to be had. But this is very, very simple.
Jason, going back to your point about the jury, even though the evidence they were presented was highly slanted and selective, and in some cases just fabricated, even then 2 of them saw that it was rubbish, because he was only convicted on a 10-to-2 majority verdict, and that was 17 minutes after they'd asked the question about the blood, where, as was mentioned previously, the judge told them that it could only have been Sheila's, when in fact we know, for 100% now, that it could have been Robert Bartflowers as well. And if he'd given the correct answer to that question, I have no doubt he would have been acquitted.
And of course, Yvonne's just making the point in the chat room on Skype, the one that we've got for this show. She says it was a majority verdict, 10-2, and 1 juror fell asleep.
Yes, yeah.
So
during Jeremy's evidence, I understand. I think that's right. I'm saying that. Am I wrong?
That's correct.
Yeah,
during Jeremy's evidence, they actually nodded off. So
1 juror fell asleep. So for me, it's an absolute affront to justice and an outrage that you can put somebody on a whole life tariff who's only been convicted on a majority verdict, because that's not beyond a reasonable doubt, is it? Because there's obviously 2 people out of those 12 that have got reasonable doubt, that have got a doubt.
One juror that fell asleep was on the guilty side. He missed most of the evidence. He or she missed most of the evidence. The jury was given, because that was the case with the judge. Nothing was done about it, and it wasn't replaced, so she wasn't the jury as it was. Now, one more person would have had one more person come back with an innocent verdict. Jeremy would have walked out of the door if he completed that. This is a Crown committed.
Yeah, Yvonne's breaking up, but I think what she's trying to say is that. Sorry, Yvonne, I'm cutting over you because you're breaking up quite a bit.
That was send one more member of the jury. Had they been privy to all the information that there were in fact 2 silencers, that none of them were involved in the incident, that Robert Bartflowers did stand to inherit from the estate, and he did have motive to lie, then that could have swayed that one person, and in particular the blood evidence could have swayed that one person to come back with a not guilty verdict. And because the jury were not given privy to all this information, which we have now, it was kept from them. And verdict, and Jamie would have walked out the door a free man. And instead, the jury were misled, and because they weren't given all the facts and all the evidence, that then they weren't allowed and permitted to be a realistic conclusion, because they weren't privy to.
Yvonne, you're really breaking up, and it's
it's now been in jail.
It's really difficult to hear what you're saying. I don't know. We sort of got that. We sort of got most of it. Perhaps Trudi, you could just elaborate a little bit on that, on the point that she was making, and then I've got a comment, an interesting comment that's come in from somebody, and I'd like to put that to you. But just.
Yeah, I think what Yvonne was saying was that, the way I understand it is when they had the death penalty, it had to be a majority verdict. And,
unanimous verdict.
A unanimous verdict. Thank you, Philip. And, in this case, it wasn't. And if that juror had been dismissed from the the jury, that juror had been dismissed from the jury. Who's to say that that wasn't somebody that was on the guilty side? And actually, it could never have been a unanimous verdict in that case. And that, why should somebody be given a whole life tariff on that basis? We know he wasn't given that at trial, but it was later changed. And I think it's aberrant that he was given a whole life tariff on a majority verdict. That is not British justice.
But the other point to make about the judge's role is that he also said to the jury, and I think this did have some effect on them, that they could convict Jeremy, or they might consider they want to convict Jeremy purely on the evidence on the moderator. Now, we know the moderator wasn't involved anyway. Even if it was, we know there were two of them. So that direction, which is really what it was, is deeply flawed.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. The jury were told that on the silencer evidence alone, they could convict.
So that was the instruction. That was the judge when the judge directs the jury, only before they go off to do to consider the verdict. The judge will direct a jury on what they can and what they can't find him guilty or not guilty. So they said that judge concluded that they could find him guilty based upon the moderator evidence alone.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, weight was given to the silencer. It was only two people involved. Was it Sheila or was it Jeremy? The weight was given to the silencer. And who did you believe, Julie or Jeremy? And actually, I don't think anybody did believe Julie, because she was proven to be a liar during the trial. And then afterwards, of course, she sold a story and made a lot of money. So she's equally been proven a liar since.
Yeah, and she benefited us from it as well. I mean, we're talking about all these people that have contributed to Jeremy's conviction, have all financially gained. Whether you believe the people that his family did it so that he would not inherit, like Yvonne so put it so well, the cuckoo in the nest is not having, the cuckoo's not having the nest, because he was adopted, and the family probably felt they were outsiders. So I've got a comment that somebody's put. Now this guy, it's somebody we know. It's Chrissy Morris, and he says he's 5 minutes from the farm, and the person that was involved in the case has said that Jeremy was definitely the killer, but the evidence wasn't conclusive enough, so they manufactured it.
So that's like noble cause corruption, and that makes it okay, does it? I mean, I don't do that anyway, but I don't think that's any better, really.
I think. Listen, I'm just reading it out. This, it's people here. I mean, if he's only 5 minutes away from where it happened, I mean, I would imagine there's 1,000,001 rumours that went round at the time, as there is in any community. I know whenever there's anything happens in a place where I grew up, Dinnington, near Sheffield. You fart and somebody knows about it, up road. So I would imagine there's millions and millions of rumours that went round like that. Okay, well, we've got about 10 or 15 minutes left. Is there anything that you want to bring up? Anybody wants to bring up? I know Yvonne's been writing in this chat room here. If there's anything that you want to read out or anything like that. But is there anything in the last 10 or 15 minutes that you want to tell us that you want to bring up that perhaps we've not spoke about so far?
Well, maybe the Sheila's Alive campaign that Trudi mentioned earlier. As she said, there is now overwhelming evidence that Sheila was alive when the police turned up at 4:45 in the morning. And that's the reason they sat outside for so long, because they didn't go into the house till 7:30. So whatever that is, more than 3 hours, they sat, in effect, twiddling their thumbs outside. But the reason they did that was because they knew she was inside and armed. So that's a fairly understandable response if you're facing that situation. But if she hadn't been alive, obviously there would have been some caution in approaching the house, but they would have entered far, far quicker than they did. And that's the reason they didn't.
Yeah, and I want to come back to really what we know about the sound moderators. Obviously, we can't go into specific detail on what's in the report and why we know what we know. But one thing we do know is that the chain of evidence is not correct in this instance, that the labels weren't signed correctly, that things went very, very wrong here. And that this needs really looking into, and we hope that the consideration is given. And I think coming back to what you said earlier, Jason, about the press and why it's important, and why we need the public, because we do need the public. When you think about historically miscarriages of justice and the momentum and the motivations to overturn these convictions, often that does come from public pressure. And we are at a very, very key point now in this case. I think we're in my lifetime working on this case, which is probably 8 or 9 years now. This is a really pivotal point now in terms of the evidence that we've put forward and how important it is. And actually we are at that point. And so, we need the public to be, looking at this with us and saying, well, actually, if this is material evidence that undermines the safety of this conviction, then it deserves to go back to the Court of Appeal. It's in nobody's interest that this keeps getting brushed under the carpet. We talk about finality for victims, and I get that is incredibly important. But Jeremy is a victim here, and this has been brushed under the carpet for 33 years, and it can't be allowed to continue because this case has such lurking doubt to it. If we're giving you such a concrete piece of evidence, then in whose interest is it to just say no, we're not going to look at it, we're not going to give it due consideration. So, I think it really is important that the police, the public get behind us and really give Jeremy the support he deserves. Because if this isn't looked at in the way that it should be looked at, then something is very, very wrong with British justice. And I think the public need to be aware of that, because I think they should be very afraid that if you've got people with all the power that can do anything that they want to you, it could happen to anybody. And that's a very scary thought for anybody caught up in the criminal justice system, because you never know when it's going to happen to you. So, please keep the good comments coming, and please comment on the newspaper articles, and, please get behind the campaign, because we just need that pivotal push now. It's important that these decisions are made in a public arena. It shouldn't be a closed justice system. It should be very much an open justice system that highlights what's gone wrong for these things to be happening. We've had a massive public campaign at the moment on what's going wrong pre-trial, and the world and its wife is looking into why cases are collapsing, particularly these rape cases. And that is a really important dialogue that the public have suddenly been opened up to. Their eyes have been made aware of what can go wrong. But we also need to look at what goes wrong when people are convicted and then can't get hold of their evidence, because that is another really important conversation that keeps people in prison for years and years and years without any hope of release if they can't get their paperwork to investigate their cases.
Right, Yvonne's back anyway. She just dropped from the call. Yvonne, I was just saying the last we're down to the last. Well, we're down to the last about 5 or 6 minutes before we have to say goodbye. So Yvonne's just given her. What would you like people to take away from this? What would you like people to remember? And what can people do to help?
A lot, yeah. Well, I'd like people who are sitting on the fence to maybe consider the new evidence. I know we can't be explicit in what this report contains, but for people to to realise miscarriages of justice do still happen. And it's not just in Jeremy's case, there's lots of cases of miscarriages of justice, which is highlighted by taking place in Liverpool in October, in which, there's literally hundreds and hundreds of people affected in this country. And that's an event where we can all meet, we can all come together, we all trade ideas on how we can possibly rectify things for the good of everybody. And I know that Jeremy will very soon be free. I absolutely know it. And once he is, the people who've doubted him and doubted the safety of this conviction and everything will see the full truth.
Well, I think we all echo those sentiments. I mean, I, for one, I've interviewed you 2 or 3 times. I think this is about the 3rd time that I've interviewed yourself or people involved with the Bamber campaign. And I wouldn't do it if I didn't think that it was completely innocent. I tried to write to him. It's difficult. You're up against it's like bows and arrows against the lightning, as it says on one of the worlds. Phillip, I'm going to give you a last word, and then we're going to have to wrap this up and say good night.
Okay, well, just picking up on something Trudi said, that this could happen to anybody. I mean, Jeremy's an eloquent guy. He's not stupid by any means, and was in a position to work on his own defence. He was fortunate enough to be able to afford what on paper was a good defence team, although they turned out to be worse than useless. So if this happens to somebody with those advantages, it is very likely to happen to people with far less advantages, and that's what people should remember.
Yeah, absolutely. It can happen to anybody, can't it? It can happen to anybody, and it's
absolutely. And I'd just like to reiterate the point that we absolutely know 1,000,000% of Jeremy's innocence. We've seen all the evidence. We've analysed documentation for years and years and years, and we categorically know he's innocent. And we will not stop. And we will, the fight for us continues every day, and we will not stop. So no matter what pressure we put on by people who maybe get at us now and again and go, oh, we just crackpots and this and that and the other, we won't stop. We know the truth, and we will make sure that Jeremy walks out of those days a free man, his innocence proven.
What about a last word on how is Jeremy anyway? How's he coping? How's he doing? How is he at the moment? Is he okay? Because he's not a young man anymore, is he? It's we're talking. It must be. Is he in his 50s? Isn't he?
He's 57. Yeah, he's doing okay. He's doing okay. He's he's measured. He's had a lot of time to get used to the disappointments and the highs and the lows, and he's very even, he's very measured, and he knows that we're good and solid behind him, and whatever happens, we'll keep continuing. But if I could just say one thing, which to quote Magna Carta, which we still hold high regard in our British judicial constitution, and some parts of it still reign supreme in terms of the rule of law. And one of those things is, to no man will we sell, to no man deny or delay the right of justice. And so I hope that no longer will this right of justice be delayed to this man, and that this is the tide now. This is where it ends.
Well, great. Well, so we've got a couple of minutes. Andy's just reminded me that it were only 10 to when I said that, but we've got a couple of minutes just to fill in at the end. Let's just try and fill this last couple of minutes. We're with Yvonne, Hartley, Trudi Benjamin, and Phillip Walker. We're talking from the Jeremy Bamber Justice Campaign. It's been brilliant speaking to you tonight. We had some problems earlier on. a few technical problems. Perhaps we should plan a little bit better, but then again, we're not commercial radio. We're not professionals. We're just guys that do this in a spare time, simply because we think that it's worth it, and it's better to try to do something like this. And we do have a half decent reach here. Of people, and we've got a really, really loyal bunch of regular listeners and people in the chat room. So we're talking about stuff like this. This is what we do. We're not trying to be Radio 5 Live or Talk Sport or whatever. We're not trying to be anything. We're just doing this and getting people like yourselves on, people that are putting their own needs second, because there's somebody else got a need that is required more than the need for themselves. If you understand the selflessness that people like yourself do, and we really appreciate it. So a big thank you to Yvonne, Trudi and Phillip for this evening. It's been really good. We're going to have you on again, but next time I think we probably do it on a time. We'll do it on a night where we can all get in early, and we can sort out the sound issues, and we can sort out how to get onto the Google Hangouts and stuff. So we look forward to having you back on. I just want to finally, before we go away, I've had a lot of people being in contact with me, wanted to know how yesterday went. As people, regular listeners will know, yesterday I went for a measure to be measured up for my prosthetic leg. I was to be assessed first for my prosthetic leg, because there's certain criteria that you have to meet, and thankfully I passed that criteria. And when the guy told me, I nearly started blubbing, but that's another story. But I've been measured up for my prosthetic leg, and I will have it on next Tuesday. I will have it next Tuesday. So in a week's time, I'm going to have another leg, and I can't thank people that have all the people that have gone through this with me. Everybody who listens to Raconteurs News has gone through this with me, and I really appreciate all the support that I've had, because it's been absolutely fantastic. I've had support from everybody, and I think that the fact that I'm on a prosthetic, I'm going to be on a prosthetic, I'm going to be walking again by early October, justifies my initial decision when I could have had a couple of operations to try and save the leg. I said, no, let's just get rid of it, because it was 90% not going to work anyway, and we're going to have it amputated anyway. So it sort of justifies my decision to do that. And I'd like to thank everybody that supported me, everybody that sent me goodwill messages, and I'll be back on my feet in a couple of weeks, because I don't think straight away I'll be able to be walking around unaided, and I have to be safe on it before they'll let me take it home. But I'll have it next week on the 2nd. So big thank you to everybody. Andy, are we going to finish off with?
We've got a tune lined up from Heath. I believe it's the good old favourite boy from Sheffield.
Oh, excellent. Well, thank you to everybody who's been listening tonight. Thank you to our guests, Trudi, Yvonne and Phillip Walker.
Thank you for having us.
It's been we will have you again very soon, but we'll definitely get the sound issues sorted beforehand. Although it was all my end by the sound of it anyway, so I can't really complain. Well, we'll see you next week. We've got Dave Sumner on Monday, and I do believe we'll probably have Russell Burton on Tuesday. So Dave Sumner and Russell Burton next week. Have a great week, and we'll play out with this. I'm a boy from Sheffield. See you later tomorrow. Bye.
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 Smell like coal. Gotta get the wiggies cause I'm off to the hole in the road. I'm walking up school and I'm up to the city early all night, and I'm not looking pretty. See, I got this job downtown, selling knocked off ladies watches for £1.